So if you are not comfortable with being recorded, then you can always wait and watch the event at a later time. It's going to be posted publicly on the library's website. And just to give you an idea of how things are going to progress, we're first going to hear from Sarah Hutton of UMass Amherst. Then around 2:35-ish, we'll hear from 3 STCC faculty who all have experience using OER. And then the last 10 minutes or so will be for questions for all of our speakers. And you can also ask me questions about OER on our campus. But you can also feel free to ask questions as we go. You can use the raise hand feature, or I will be monitoring the chat if you would rather use the chat. And then just finally, quickly, I want to remind you that there are still opportunities to receive a stipend for OER coursework at STCC. So if that's something you're interested in, please get in touch with me and we can set up a time to chat about that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Sarah Hutton. Sarah is the head of student success and engagement in the university libraries at UMass Amherst. She's a longtime advocate for open education and has extensive experience guiding students and faculty through the adoption and creation of open educational content. So please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. It's still relatively bright and brisk this afternoon. So I'm gonna get started by telling you a little bit more about myself to provide the lens I'm looking through during this conversation. I'm gonna be covering a lot of content, first of all. So I am a librarian. I'm also a first-gen college student, first and family PhD student. I'm incredibly passionate about promoting access to information, education, and providing opportunities for student agency, particularly to those who have not had educational scaffolding as a part of their upbringing. So for these reasons, I've spent all of these years working with and researching open education initiatives. I work closely with our Open Education Initiative Grant Award Program at UMass Amherst. I'm a member of the Global Open Education Research Graduate Student Network and the Creative Commons Global Network. So a little bit more about what we'll be covering today. I'm going to be trying to keep the very complex topic of copyright relatively simple. I'm going to start by providing a broad overview of copyright to start, focusing on things like what it protects, how long it lasts, why it matters. Next, I'll talk a bit about exceptions to copyright and what is okay to do for educational purposes under the auspices of fair use in the TEACH Act. Finally, I'll provide an overview of Creative Commons licensing, the keys that really unlock so much of that content for adoption, adaptation, and reuse. So this is a very familiar symbol for us, but why? Why does it matter? Why do we have laws that restrict the copying and sharing of creative work? How do these laws work in the context of the internet and wherever nearly everything we do involves making a copy of something? So copyright is an important area of law, one that reaches into nearly every facet of our lives, whether we know it or not. Acts that are not regulated by copyright, like lending a friend a physical book, become regulated by copyright when the acts are translated to an online environment, like sharing that same book just via the internet. So because almost everything we do online involves making a copy, copyright is a regular feature in our lives. So here are some of the fundamentals. Although copyright laws vary from country to country, there are many commonalities among these copyright laws globally. So firstly, copyright grants a set of exclusive rights to copyright owners, which means that no one else can copy, distribute, publicly perform, adapt, or otherwise use that work without permission of the copyright holder. Copyright grants rights to literary and artistic works that are original. Copyright is available to everything from paintings to blog posts, but all work must meet a certain standard of originality to warrant copyright. So different countries frame the test in different ways, but is often either considered a test of originality or authorial presence. Generally speaking, this means the work must have been a creation of its creator and not copied from another work. Copyright does not protect facts or ideas themselves, only the expression of those facts or ideas. So the differences between an idea and the expression of that idea can be tricky, but it's also quite important to understand. While copyright law does give creators control over the expression of an idea, it does not allow the copyright holder to own or exclusively control the idea itself. As a general rule, copyright is automatic the moment that the work is created, though some countries require that work be fixed in a tangible medium before granting copyright. In countries that require fixation, such as the US, you do not have a copyright until you type your poem, record the song, or otherwise capture the work in a fixed form. While registration with the local copyright office often confers certain benefits to the copyright holder and allows you to officially record your authorship, registration is not required to gain copyright protection, and that is not the case in many other countries. Copyright protection lasts a long time, often many decades after the creator dies. For works created in the US, copyright lasts from the moment a work is created until 70 years after the death of the author, except for works produced by a company or employer, in which case the copyright lasts 95 years from the date of publication. So this means the copyright is expired for works published in the United States before 1926, as of January 2021, and that is a moving law that changes every year. Copyright protection is balanced against other public interests. The rights granted to copyright owners may be considered against other public interests, such as freedom of expression rights, the right to access information, and the needs of people with disabilities. There are occasions when copyright protections may be limited to serve the public interest. So the combination of these very long terms with automatic protection has created a massive amount of orphaned works, copyrighted works for which the copyright holder is unknown or impossible to locate. So there are two primary rationales for copyright law, though rationales do vary among legal traditions. Utilitarian is the first, and under this rationale, copyright is designed to provide an incentive to creators. The aim is to encourage the creation and publication of new works for social benefit. The second is authors' rights. Under this rationale, copyright protection serves to recognize and protect the deep connection authors have with their creative works. This rationale is founded upon moral rights, which ensure attribution of authors and preserve the integrity of creative works. So the utilitarian rationale is more commonly associated with the common law tradition, while authors' rights are historically identified with the civil law tradition. While different legal traditions identify more strongly with one or the other of these rationales, or may hold other rationales, many copyright systems are influenced by and draw from both utilitarian and author rights rationales due in large part to historical reasons. So what is copyrightable? In countries that have signed on to major copyright treaties, such as in the US, copyright exists in the expansively defined categories of literary and artistic works. Though those rules, they vary from country to country. This list is not exhaustive, but I'm sure that you can think of something in almost every one of these categories. The first thing that comes to mind for me is computer software. It's one of the things that a lot of folks don't think about when they're using it, that this particular piece of software that, processes your daily activities is copyrighted and owned by the company that, produced the code, unless it's open source, of course. So take a moment to consider this. What would the world look like if copyright did not have any limits to what it prevented you from doing with copywritten work? So imagine, for example, resorting to Google's search engine on your laptop or smartphone to settle a disagreement with a friend about some bit of trivia. You type in your search query and Google comes up empty. You then learn that a court has required Google to delete its entire web index because it never entered into copyright agreements with each individual author of each individual page on the web. So by indexing a web page and showing the public a snippet of the contents in the search results, the court has declared that Google violates the copyrights of hundreds of millions of people and can no longer show these search results. So fortunately, thanks to exceptions and limitations built into copyright laws in much of the world, especially the US, including the fair use doctrine under US copyright law, this hypothetical is very unlikely to become reality. So this is one of the many illustrations of why it is so important that copyright law has those built-in limitations and exceptions. So fair use. It may not be what you expect. Whether or not you are within the boundaries of fair use depends on the facts of your particular situation. And that's one of the the most favored terms amongst copyright lawyers, librarians, anybody who talks about copyright really is, it depends. It depends. What exactly are you using? How widely are you sharing the materials? Are you confining your work to the nonprofit environment of the university? So to determine whether you are within fair use, the law calls for a balanced application of the factors. These 4 factors come directly from the fair use provision in section 107 of the US Copyright Act, and they have been examined and developed in judicial situations over time. You must examine the purpose and character of your use of that work, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion taken, and the effect of the use of that material on the potential market. So to determine whether or not whether a use is fair use or not, always keep in mind that you need to apply all 4 of these factors. For example, do not jump to a conclusion based simply on whether or not your use is educational or commercial. All the factors need to be weighed equally. So there are, of course, tools that can help you in this evaluation process, such as this fair use checklist from Columbia University Libraries, or the fair use evaluator from the ALA Office for Information Technology Policy. You still need to evaluate, apply, and weigh and balance the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount of substantiality of the portion used, and the potential impact on the market or value of that work in the market that you are using it in. So the big question is, can I use it in the classroom? I mean, that's what this is all about when you're looking at using content in distance and remote learning and adopting and adapting content to use in OER. There are exceptions when you do not have to apply the factors of fair use, which fall under these 3 criteria. And some of the typical expressions of those 3 exceptions would look something like these examples: showing a part of a movie or series in your class, including images or graphs in your lecture slides, or playing music, all in an educational setting. That all, falls within typical educational use. So here are a few typical questions I received from fellow faculty that you might be thinking about, particularly in the remote learning environment. And you're thinking about, well, can I do this? Can I do that? So I'm going to walk you through some of the, I guess, like greatest hits. Sorry, it's like living in a haunted house. I have a 6-year-old and a, what are you, 36, 37 now? And a couple of cats. I never knew who's creeping up behind me. So first of all, because there are no exact rules governing fair use, you have to use your best judgment when deciding whether to post materials to an LMS, learning management system, without permission. There is no specific number of chapters, paragraphs, or lines that is certainly fair or unfair, nor are there specific percentages. I know that's what everybody is always looking for, like how many pages, what percentage of this can I use? Those don't exist. Copying a single chapter from a book may be fine, while copying the entire book usually is not. Usually. Consider the 4 factors that I previously mentioned and try to determine honestly whether your use seems reasonable. You could check your judgment by answering this question. If someone used this much of my work, would I think it was fair, or would I want to be asked for permission? Another can I question is using clips from DVDs with anti-circumvention protection. So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, states that circumvention protection cannot be broken. However, the DMCA also requires that every 3 years, the Librarian of Congress determines whether there are any classes of works that will be subject to exemptions from the DMCA's prohibition against circumvention of technology that effectively controls access to a copyrighted work. So in 2010, the Librarian of Congress expanded the exemption associated with motion pictures on DVDs. And this exemption now states that motion pictures on DVDs that are lawfully made and acquired and that are protected by the content scrambling system, when circumvention is accomplished solely in order to accomplish the incorporation of short portions of motion pictures into new works for the purpose of criticism or comment specifically. And where the person engaging in circumvention believes and has reasonable grounds for believing that circumvention is necessary to fulfill the purpose of the use in the following instances. And this is where it's a bit more concrete and less legalese. You're using that content, it's educational uses by college and university professors and by college and university film and media studies students. You're engaging in documentary filmmaking or using non-commercial videos. So those are all considered fair and fall within this expanded exemption within the DMCA. So another question is, can I post work created by one of my students? Whether it's as an example of project that was completed in your class, or you're using it as a part of an open pedagogical course model. Students also hold copyright to the academic works that they create, such as their papers and projects and theses and dissertations. There are also privacy concerns related to any of the use of the student work. If you wish to use it, ask for permission. And then, can I use work in a distance learning class? So distance learning, remote class. And this is where we start getting into talking a little bit about the TEACH Act. So the TEACH Act, or the Technology Education and Copyright Harmonization Act, says that teachers and students at accredited educational institutions can use the works for distance learning without permission at all under certain circumstances. So if you are an educator at an accredited educational institution, you'll supervise your students' use of copywritten materials. You're using the material as an integral part of a class session, are using the material as an integral part of your curriculum, and are using the material as directly related to and of material assistance to your teaching content. And you plan to use the copyrighted materials in the following ways: performances of non-dramatic literary works, like a novel being read aloud, performances of non-dramatic musical works, like a recording of a symphony, performances of reasonable amounts of any work, an excerpt from a movie, for example, or display of any work in an amount comparable to what would be used in a live classroom. That all falls under the TEACH Act. And so this is particularly important in our current context, where, in many of the classes that we were offering face-to-face are now have shifted to remote, and it was incredibly rapid last year. And so much of many of these changes we were making to our courses and translating a lot of this content to digital format and putting online fell under the auspices of the TEACH Act, and you didn't have, that extra additional worry of copyright law was not a concern. So what is the TEACH Act? It's another area of copyright exemption that provides you with a bit more flexibility. It was created because a stipulation in the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that again is that DMCA, required the Register of Copyrights to develop guidelines for distance education specifically. And this is particularly pertinent, as I mentioned, in our current circumstances, as we are relying on remote learning more than ever. And it helps to provide instructors with greater opportunity to deliver that content in an online environment without having to worry about, is this okay to use? And fretting over percentages of chapters or page numbers. And also, that's a lot to take in, that's a lot to consider. And so I wanted to point out the fact that there are many tools available to help you assess whether what you're trying to use in your course is falls under the TEACH Act. And so there are checklists such as these that I have here from UNC Charlotte, which ask you those questions about the nature of your work that you're using, how it's related to your course, and so on, to help you make that determination of whether it falls under that exemption. So even better, a recent publication that is now my go-to resource on best practices and fair use in open educational resources and online content use is this Code of Best Practices from American University. It is built on a series of workshops, interviews, and webinars that were conducted over the course of 2019 and 2020. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to even say 2020. It's the year I want to forget. This document is intended to support authors, teachers, professors, librarians, and all open educators in evaluating when and how they can incorporate third-party copyright materials into open educational resources to meet their pedagogical goals. So this code is about 45 pages long, and I highly recommend that you take the time to review it in depth as you move forward in the adoption and development of your own open educational resources. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit to talk about opening up your access, including Creative Commons licensed material, material linked to online, and asking for permission and what that looks like in getting those permissions granted. So first off, what is Creative Commons? It's a set of legal tools, a nonprofit organization, as well as a global network and a movement, all inspired by people's willingness to share creativity and knowledge. And it is enabled by this set of open copyright licenses. And so these are really established in response to an outdated global copyright legal system. So a little bit more about the anatomy of the license itself. So it's 3 layers. Sometimes you'll see this, kind of like 3 layers of paper, and other times it'll be like a 3-layer cake. I should have included the cake. So the legal code is the base layer. This contains the lawyer readable terms and conditions that are legally enforceable in court. The commons deeds are the most well-known layer of the license. These are the web pages that lay out the key license terms and so-called human readable terms. So not legalese and not for your computer. The deeds are not legally enforceable, but instead summarize the legal code. The final layer of the license design recognizes that software plays a critical role in the creation, copying, discovery, and distribution of these works that have Creative Commons licensing assigned. So in order to make it easy for websites and web services to know when a work is available under Creative Commons license, there is a machine readable version of the license, a summary of the key freedoms granted and obligations imposed when written into a format that applications, search engines, and other kinds of technology can understand. So this provides an overview generally of the different types of Creative Commons license components, including attribution, non-commercial, share alike, and no derivatives. The expression of composition and composition of which is in each individual license tells you specifically what you can and cannot do with that work. So in the next several slides, I'm not going to go through each individual slide. It's really intended so when this is uploaded later, you can take a deeper dive. I provide an overview of each one of those 8 different configurations of Creative Commons licenses, including public domain. So you can take a deeper dive into the specificity of each, what it means for your own use. Again, this will be posted later on, so you can take a look at what each one of these is specifically, because it's a lot to cover, like in a, just a presentation. I will, however, show you this example of a work license under CC BY NC-SA. So what that means literally is, Creative Commons BY, that's, BY attribution, non-commercial, share alike. This is a calculus book I pulled up in OER Commons. So this license means that if you decide to take this text and use it, you need to give attribution to the original authors, in this case, Andrew, Elise, and Joel. You cannot use it to turn a profit, that's the non-commercial aspect. And if you decide to remix and adapt it and use it for yourself, you have to share under that same license. That's that SA share alike clause. So take a moment to think about this. Think about a piece of creative or academic work that you made that you're particularly proud of. And if you share that work with others, would you have been okay with them adapting it or using it for commercial purposes? Why or why not? Keep this in mind when you're going back through those Creative Commons licenses later on in the presentation on your own and considering which type of license to assign to your own work. It's been really interesting to me in talking to colleagues and students as they're publishing work openly with Creative Commons licenses online and, thinking about people viewing that content when they're not around to basically like defend it. I mean, it's the the scholar's anxiety of being like, my work is out there. But then there's that additional layer of like, folks could take that and adapt it and teach with it or make money off of it. Like, how does that make you feel? It's just, it's a nice contemplative exercise to go through when you're considering Creative Commons licensing. So I wanted to wrap up by highlighting a few handy resources for locating open educational content. So whether you're looking to adopt something or getting ideas for building your own, the George Mason Meta Finder is a great place to start. It includes textbooks, syllabi, grading rubrics, a ton of resources from multiple databases. There's also OASIS. So this is Openly Available Sources Integrated Search, or OASIS. It's a search tool that aims to make the discovery of open content easier, like any OER repository aggregator is. It currently searches content from about 117 different sources and contains over 388,000 records. And of course, there's Google Advanced Search. A lot of folks don't realize that you can run an advanced Google search and filter by usage rights. Here's a quick screen grab of how to set that up. And at this point, now that I've given like all this, just this content dump, I wanted to open up for questions and discussion because, everybody has their own specific context, their own experience, their own questions they may have. So I wanted to provide myself as a resource for any inquiries folks had. And of course, I have a bunch of resources included at the end here, different articles to read, further reading, courses on copyright, and the fair use calculator and whatnot. So that is it. Me talking a lot. And now opening up for questions if folks have. So can the owner of the CC license repeal it at any time if they realize their work is being used beyond the scope of their intention? So that's an interesting question, Dan. What you can do is, you can take the person who's using that content to court and it will be protected. Creative Commons licensing is copyright law. It's a copyright license. And so rather than using the terminology repeal, because that's another topic of discussion where, folks have asked, if I assign Creative Commons licensing now, can I revoke it later on so I can make money off of it myself? And that's a different conversation. And once you assign Creative Commons licensing like that, that's it, it sticks. But you can take the other person to court and be like, hey, this is copywritten under me as the creator, and I had a non-commercial license assigned to it. Does that answer your question, Dan? Cool. If you're using CC licensed material and it is revoked, where does that leave you and how do you track that? And it is revoked. Could you be a little more specific there? So are you just kind of like flipping the scenario that you're the person who's making money off of the other person's content? Or is there a specific scenario in mind? Is it okay, so to speak? There isn't really.
Can you hear me, Sarah?
I can.
Oh, I was just asking if I could speak. I didn't want to interrupt your presentation.
Oh, is it okay to speak? Okay. Yeah. No, fine. Yeah, please.
So yeah, in one circumstance, I can imagine right now I'm using a lot of Creative Commons material that I've found. And I must admit, I'm probably lax on attribution based on the turnaround time that we were given to sort of construct a lot of our distance ed material this semester. So that's one issue. But, you know, if someone, so my first question was like, yeah, if somebody revokes something, how do you find that out? And you answered that. But the second thing is, you know, I mean, yeah, that was my second question. Like, you know, where would I even look? Would someone come after me if I have something that's, say, 10 years old, but still valid, and they've since revoked that and they no longer want people using it, and they somehow find out that, like, I've got their old slides, but they've updated them 10 times over, and yeah, no long they whatever they've done with that material, they've incorporated it, say, into something proprietary that they were working on at the time. And now they've now decided that, yeah, I no longer want this to be a public work. Or, you know, what do you do about that? And you know,
well, it's interesting because this was actually a part of a discussion thread recently on the Creative Commons OER list, like really extensive thread. But somebody was asking specifically about revoking copyright, Creative Commons copyright licensing. And so essentially a creator can't revoke, like they can't decide at some point, like I want to take away the Creative Commons licensing. So that's not a concern. And so far as tracking like longitudinally what has happened with different you know, versions or iterations of content, it really depends on the platform that it was originally hosted on. I mean, there are some platforms where, you know, you can track versioning, but more often than not, like you don't really know longitudinally like how that has been adapted over time. And that isn't really discovered until like a particular case brings it to light, where somebody takes that time to do the investigative research to be like, how have people been using my work? Or they notice it. Like I, for example, have a colleague who used to be a documentary filmmaker in the UAE. And at the time when he was working there, had, you know, he talked about working with somebody who was asking about like selling his content. And he was like, no, you know, this is my creative work. You know, I don't want your company to profit off of it. And that was kind of the end of the conversation at the time. And it wasn't until later when he saw a copy of that film he'd made for sale somewhere else. And like, that's how he discovered it. And so that is honestly more often what happens is that somebody discovers that this work has been used in this way that is not, you know, true, you know, beyond the scope of the intention, as you'd mentioned earlier. There's no like tracking database or any, you know, like a citation tracker like Scopus or something for Creative Commons works.
Does anyone else have questions for Sarah before we move on? I'm seeing no. Thank you, Sarah, so much. Next up, we have Josh Carreiro, who is Professor of Sociology and Chair of the Social and Behavioral Sciences Department at STIC. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things about my use of OER. I'm just new to it. I went through the, I don't know, Chelsea, what the training or whatever we would call it last year. I have no sense of time, so it might have been a year and a half ago, perhaps, probably. And I created I created my urban sociology course around OER, and the trouble I had was that for such a specific course, there was no pre-existing sort of open education textbook, which for intro to sociology and intro to macroeconomics, microeconomics, you tend to find those sorts of things. And I was a little, at first I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a lot of work, because there wasn't a collection of resources available. And it was a good amount of work up front. But I'm really, I was actually, in the end, I was really happy that there wasn't some sort of collection of resources already there, because it created quite a bit of flexibility for me. I was able to, like I said, it was a lot of work up front. I was able to compile a ton of resources and then really carefully curate those to the course that I wanted to create. And I thought I think Chelsea, you said we could share a screen.
Yes, you should have screen sharing capabilities.
Yeah, there. I just, I wanted to share, let me see, hopefully you'll, well, don't read my email. Do you see this highway construction and displacement?
Yes.
You do? Okay, great. And so basically, I just wanted, this is just an example of how I built my class using OER. And actually, a lot of you probably know Francie Riddle in the art department, and she sort of, I stole this from her. And what I've done is I've created the entire class just using Google Slides. And so for each module, I have, I sort of walk the student through all the different topics that we're discussing. And again, I'm really sharing, there's nothing advanced about what I'm doing here. I'm sharing this because it's so simple, just to point out how simple it is. And this is sort of the example of flexibility that I'm talking about. So as the students move through the slides, I've just built all the resources into that specific slide. And what I really like about this is it allows me, it's a weird term, but it allows me to control their reading. Instead of having just a collection of readings that they can read in any order they like, here I'm sort of walking them through the module, and you can see, they're here's this thing about highway construction and displacement, and then they click here and it brings them to a YouTube video on the interstate highway system and how it impacted central city areas. And so that also brings me to another point, is using OER, I've been able to really incorporate a variety of resources. And I've actually moved quite a bit to using videos and podcasts, and moved away from, maybe I've got a 50-50 split between audio, video, and readings. And I'm really excited about that. I think, our students, all students have a variety of learning styles. And I really love the fact that OER makes it easy to incorporate the, different types of resources. So I really like that flexibility. And then the other thing I wanted to just quickly share is, I think this is it. So again, I kind of control their reading. So this is a segment on residential segregation. And here's my little and then here's the reading. And so they just click right out to it. It's in the journal, City and Community. And so again, I only share these because of their simplicity. I really enjoy, in my opinion, there's not a great urban sociology textbook. And so, I've basically been able to sort of create my own, sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing. Been able to create my own, and really the simplicity of using Google Slides has been fantastic. I never used them before, but they are very similar to Microsoft PowerPoint. And the nice thing about Google Slides is you can download them as a PowerPoint as well. So I can make both of those available to the students. But yeah, those are just the two things I wanted to share, is the way that OER just creates amazing possibilities for flexibility, sort of on the spot, transitions, or I don't know quite how to phrase it. But also I do like, maybe I am a bit of a control freak, but I like the fact that I can really say, like, hey, here's what you need, here's what I want you to read, and just really easily, sort of force them in, if they're reading or watching the videos, force them and walk them through all the material. And hopefully that makes more sense. Dan said it allows integrated sequencing. Oh, what a great phrase, Dan. You're always so wonderful. All right, well, that's all I have to say. And I'm excited. I will say this, I'll be doing the program again creating a new course called The Immigrant City. And I am just so excited to be, that's a brand new course. So I'll be building it from the ground up using OER. And it's probably what I'll just be doing in the future with every new course.
Thank you, Josh. Next up, we have Eileen Cusick, who teaches in the Business Administration Department. She's been working with the library, with me specifically, on OER for a few years now. So she'll be talking about that. Welcome, Eileen.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Good. All right, I'm going to actually share my screen or share my slides. So hold on one second and let me go to share screen. Hello, there we go. And OER 101, okay. All right, so. Yes, I like to say I'm a huge proponent of OER. So I have put 10 slides here, but a lot of them, they're going to go by fairly quickly. To repeat what Sarah had said, it's nice to have these, sitting there for the deeper dive. But as Chelsea had mentioned, well, if you've thought about OER permissions, Chelsea's going to sit you down and talk all about the 5R permissions of OER. So I'm not actually going to get into those, but that's one of the things you have to cover. And Sarah did mention that earlier. Why or when did I get involved and why did I get involved? Well, I did notice that students were unable or unwilling to purchase some of the textbooks that I had. And I also was noticing that in my courses, I was creating my own examples. Maybe a textbook had too much or not enough information covered in that book. I found similar topics to what I wanted to cover perhaps in another management book, but I would never want to say, oh, buy this management book also. And I also found myself saying, I wish the textbook also covered da 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 da. So when I was chatting with, I love having office roommates. I had Christina Atwater, for those of you, most of you probably know her. She would say to me, she had said to me, did you know? And she's the one that introduced me initially to this whole OER movement. And of course, then pointed me right over to Chelsea. And so Chelsea being the OER librarian, not just for our school, but I think for the whole state, and the OER advocate. So there was a huge place, a huge resource for me to go to. And so responding to her email, sort of like what we're seeing now, there were stipends and grants available. And I did my first class on OIT 110 communications and editing. So the blurb there, the description from the course catalog is there. But another key piece to mention is that the Northeast has an OER summit, normally at the University of Massachusetts. Lord knows where. Well, I just did receive something this week about it being online this year, but I presented on the process of moving to the OER solution, and it was a wonderful place to find out about other collaborations. And then I was also put on a statewide OER working group where I was the chair of the stakeholder subgroup. And the reason I mention that is that the Department of Higher Ed, they have such a huge support here of the OER movement. So right now, my OER world today and in the near future, I'm using OER for my OIT 110 and 111, my communications editing and editing 2 class. I also use it for CMP 122 Excel and my Business 222 business decision tools. And in the near future, I hope to convert my OIT 130 Office Management Procedures and Theory class and my CMP 123 Access class. So I'm huge with, I just have a huge respect for all that I can find here. So my reasons, well, first off, the student textbook costs. There may be a good selection of material. I could write my own material. Some well-established sites exist out there. I'll show you a list of what I'm using right now. What I liked is I could pick and choose what I wanted to present or cover. Sarah mentioned it earlier with the Mason Organizational Meta Finder, the MOM, but there's more organization and navigation to help find this OER material. Plus, I always start off with the college's library website where there's an OER finder link right there. So some of my places that I've gone for my courses: Excelsior College, Khan Academy, MIT, Open Oregon Press Books, the Stick Library, TED Talks, University of Minnesota, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and YouTube. So I found, now this is because of the courses I'm teaching. Obviously, if you're going to teach something else, you're going to find some that are going to work really well for you. But these are the ones right now that have been working well for me. But I want to also talk about the pain points of going with OER. I need to check that the material is still available. On occasion, material from other sites, especially colleges, perhaps they had a restructure of their website and the material gets moved. So I've had that happen a few times, so you have to go hunting. It was there 2 weeks ago. So each semester I have to check my course map to verify that the links that I have are there. Also, you got to schedule your time to research your topics. And as Sarah had mentioned, just because you found it does not mean you can use it. So you got to ask someone. When in doubt, Chelsea's there for us. Sometimes I found dissatisfaction. One of the courses I found a textbook to try for a semester, and it turned out I thought it would be great. It didn't work out. It was too much information included in textbooks. So I decided to go another route. I don't know if this is still true today, but the copy and mailroom staff, they were able to print the material I needed for my students. Again, I'm not certain what the relationship we have right now with the copy room, mailroom is. I just remember at that point we had an agreement where we could do that. I can create my own assignments. I can write my own material. And I put that in the benefits and in the pain points because I like writing my own assignments. I like writing my own material, but you have to like it. Otherwise it becomes a pain point. Also, everything that I've done with these courses that I've converted so far, there was no one textbook to cover that entire course. And so that's why I found it really useful to go out and find something specifically out at the University of Minnesota website or Open Oregon Press Books. You know, it depended upon what the topic was that I was covering. And again, because you have the 5 R's there, that you have to remember to give credit where it's due. Hopefully, I'm going to be able, I'm huge on real world project simulations. I would love to be able to eventually convert my CMP 106 course and maybe other courses as Josh had mentioned. As I start to get other courses to create, I would like to just start right off with doing OER. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen.
And back to you, Chelsea.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anne Simao, who is math faculty at STIC, and she's actually here listening, but her schedule didn't allow her to present live, so I have a recorded video that she made for us. So I'm going to share my screen and show that, and we'll test it to make sure that the sound works okay. So hopefully you can all see my screen. Okay, and we're gonna test the sound.
Hi, my name is...
Could you all hear it? Okay, I see thumbs up. Awesome, here we go.
Anne Simao, and I'm a full-time math faculty at Springfield Technical Community College. I love open ed resources. I am currently 100% open ed, and that means that my students do not pay a penny for any of the materials that they need for any of the math classes that they take with me. I started my OER journey back in 2013. So my dean approached me and there was a committee, and I decided to join it because I thought it was wonderful, because math books are so expensive, and a lot of us can say that about any of our disciplines. In 2015, I presented at the Pneumatic conference about my OER journey at that point in time, and the amount of money that I saved my students just over that year or two that I'd been using it. Pneumatic is the New England Mathematical Association for two-year colleges. I was also in 2017 a panel presenter at the OER MCCC Go Open grant. And so a group of us were able to discuss our OER journey with pairs that were looking to potentially go open. I was also in 2018 in a Mass Live article with other faculty members from various community colleges around the state, talking about our open ed and talking to students and how much they love our journey with open ed. So one of the things that I love about open education resources is that my students no longer have to wait for a textbook. They don't have to wait for the bookstore to find those resources, and they also don't have to wait for their financial aid check. They don't have to wait to get paid by work in order to be successful in the course. As an inner city community college, a lot of our students don't have the extra funds in order to buy our books. So why not present them a free alternative? So I also love the math department because we work so well together. We share our resources, we share our websites, we share our videos, we share our My Open Math core shells. By doing this, we all improve on it and we all share it again with each other. So our students are able to be very successful with free resources. And as we grow, it can only get better. And so I encourage you, if you have not tried to go open yet, at least try one class, because there is nothing freer than be able to share with students that email you semester after semester to say, hi, professor, do you have that website, or do you have the link that I can use in order to be successful in this class with additional resources? Because sometimes we don't find everything we need in one book, and we need to know that we can go on the internet and find all of the information that we need. So that's been my journey. I've absolutely loved it, and I encourage every faculty member to reach out to me if they have any questions. I am here to help you.
Okay, so now I know it's just a few minutes before 3, but I'd like to open it up for any questions. If any of you have specific questions to the faculty that we've heard from, or if you wanted to ask me questions about the opportunities we have for OER creation, I am here to take your questions. Oh, Marcia, you got to unmute yourself. And yes, Michelle, you can certainly send me an email, and we can either set up a time to talk on Zoom or whatever works for you. Sorry, Marcia, go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. I just wanted to say that this is all very new to me. And I just think you all did such an excellent presentation job. I really appreciated it. You gave me a lot of new ideas, and I learned so much from this. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, well, thank you all so much for coming. I am available by email. I know that some of you have tried to call my office and it directs you to email. The library's closed and that's why. But if you prefer Zoom or talking on the phone, we can certainly arrange that. Again, this has been recorded, so I will be posting it on the library's website for you to refer back to. And I'm very thankful that you all could make it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Josh, Eileen, and Anne as well.